Ladies and gentlemen, hi. Please welcome to the first ever, the first in the history of mankind, Helsinki Business Symposium. Good. The event where superb speakers meet the young and ambitious minds of business world in Helsinki. It means you guys over there.
This event, with the glory and glamour of Oscar Gala itself and the excitement of Super Bowl, has been organized by the HBS team, consisting of 8 students from the Aalto University School of Business. The team has spent almost a year planning and organizing this seminar, contacting the speakers, and making this symposium happen. As the wittiest ones of you might already have noticed, we have the delight to host this event. This handsome gentleman next to me is Alexander Pihlainen, a living legend from KY.
Thank you. And this beautiful sunshine over here is Katarina Helmi-Niemi, the queen of showbiz at KY and my personal idol as well. But what would be a better way to kick off this festival than hearing a wise words from the heart and soul of KY? The chairman of the board himself, please welcome Antti Korpelainen.
Also on my behalf, welcome to the first ever Helsinki Business Symposium. I'm personally very excited and it's awesome to see you guys here. The theme for the event is risk and reward. The theme perfectly describes the attitudes and the spirit our volunteers have maintained when preparing this event. In a promotional video for Helsinki Business Symposium, my friend, Simo, co-founder of Brunila, shared his thoughts on risk. I feel his ideas describe this event so well that I will ruthlessly exploit them. And I quote, "Doing and pursuing goals that you believe in is not that big of a risk compared to doing something you don't have true passion for. Behind every successful company or event is a person or a team who has taken a risk. There always has to be someone to take the risk, to take the first step, just to boldly dive all in. I'd like to thank all of our volunteers, our speakers, our corporate partners who have participated in taking this first step. I hope that during these 2 days, everyone here learns something new about taking risks. Above all, I hope you all enjoy this great new learning experience.
Thank you, Antti.
Thank
That
you.
was great. Then we would like to share some practicalities with you. There are several toilets in the venue, and you can find the directions from the floor plan that is on the walls. If you want to enjoy lunch, there are 2 restaurants here in Korjaamo and many places nearby.
And remember to check out the other side of Korjaamo as well, so-called Kulmasali, where the workshops and crash courses will be held on Thursday. There will also be a promotion stance of our partners. And if and when you want to share your thoughts on social media, remember to use the official hashtag #HelBizSymposium. So #HelBizSymposium. Okay. And lastly, please be early for the panels and speeches and workshops, so we'll stay on the schedule and don't disturb the audience or the speakers.
Today we will hear a great number of amazing speakers, have 2 interesting panels, a crash course and 2 workshops. The first workshop of the day will take place in Kulmasali, as Alexander already mentioned. It is hosted by Ernst & Young and it will start at 10:30. As the first speaker of the day, we have the honor to present you the most influential woman of the Finnish business world in 2013. She holds a PhD in economics and is a professor of practice in Hanken School of Business.
And that's just the first part. Previously, she's worked as Executive Vice President, Corporate Relations and Sustainability at Fortum. And some might even say that she's quite impressive professional board member, or at least I said, after we scrolled down her quite long and impressive LinkedIn profile for about 30 minutes, and then gave a standing ovation on her experience of working in over 20 different executive boards, such as Kone, Finnish National Opera, Sanoma, Stora Enso, Mehiläinen, and Aalto-yliopisto, to mention just a few of them. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to Anne Brunila.
So good morning, everybody, and it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be the first speaker in this kind of Helsinki Business Symposium. When we agreed that I have a speech here, and the general theme would be risk, so I was thinking what would be the title, what would be a nice title, and how to talk about, in general terms, about the risk. So in the last seconds, I thought that it might be good to talk about a little bit like a danger, or whether risk-taking is danger or opportunity. We usually think it's more like a danger, not usually very much on the opportunity side. And actually, when I started to think about what to say to you and what to talk about the risk, I realized that I've been working with risk almost all my career, like first in the Central Bank of Finland. That was very much work related to the risks of monetary policy, exchange rates, interest rates, and all financial market stability. But never really thinking about how to define what the risk is. And after that I worked in Ministry of Finance, and of course there I was in charge of economic policies, budgetary policies, preparations, and also economic forecasts. And if you think about the economic forecast and what has been happening during the past 10 years, actually after the financial crisis, which is the most recent really risky economic situations happening in the world, also affecting the global markets. So we did economic forecasts, and then we did some sort of risk analysis, thinking about the risk in that terms, but really never in a broader scope what the risk is. And then finally in the corporate sector, where a lot of decisions of investments, markets, customers, technologies, various, many things, strategies are discussed and decided upon. So risk is always there, and we tend to think that we know what the risk is. But actually I think it is very good to start this presentation with a definition, and that, of course, Wikipedia nowadays is a very good place to look at how some issues are defined. So I looked at the Wikipedia, how they define, how the risk is defined there. And I think this is a very good approach to the risk. So it is a potential of losing something of value. So that is like a danger part of it. But then it continues like values such as physical health, social status, emotional well-being, or financial wealth can be gained or lost when taking risk resulting from a given action, activity, or inaction, foreseen or unforeseen. I think an important part in this definition is that that can be also not just something lost valuable, but also something valuable can be gained. And also that is not only risk doesn't come because of action, but equally likely risks are because of inaction. And actually the origin of the word is Arabic, and it comes from the 1621 when it was first defined in the Oxford English Dictionary. And then it was just looked from the point of view of negative event or outcome happening and reducing the value of something, outcome. But usually risk is very much discussed in connection with the financial markets. We talk about share prices, they are going up and down, and it is very hard to predict any movements in the share prices. We see the interest rates, They are moving up and down, and we try to forecast the interest rate developments, but still there are always like surprises, and we are not never really certain what is happening. And then the exchange rates. These are the three big components in the financial markets which are impacting and affecting all the financial values and financial markets. And these are actually more or less beyond our control. But then there are a lot of various kind of ways to protect from risk. In thinking like a financial markets, we can always use hedging. We can diversify our investments. And in the private life, we can take insurance, or corporates can take insurances. Or in the societal sense, we can think about social security systems, what we have, like unemployment benefits, social security benefits, healthcare, such things. They are some way to reduce individual risks. So risks are not like just for the financial markets or corporate sector, but risks are common in all areas in life. And risk management is something that everybody try to do in our everyday life. Like thinking us like individual beings, we may have accidents, we may have illness, we may lose jobs, we may think about career changes, and always then we think about whether there is a risk. So like making career change, is it better or worse, or will there be any success in the future? So there are really a lot of various types of things to think about when we approach the term called risk. And this picture I like very much because that is exactly the thing I really learned when I thought about risk, that we should not so much overweight the danger, but we should also take the side of opportunity. So there is loss or there can be gain. Like if we lose some business, if we lose some markets, if we lose some customers, that is always an opportunity to transform and try to find new customers, transform our business, make innovations, adopt new business models, find new business partners, and also like in a career type, if we lose some job, we have an opportunity to think about what we would like to do in the future, whether there is a completely new career for us ahead of us. Usually we feel that it is safer to continue as it is because we tend to think that we know the circumstances, we know the future better if we are in something which is familiar to us. It is rather difficult to jump in the kind of out of our comfort zones. But maybe that might be a big opportunity, and maybe that may reduce our risk in the future if you think about a career, or if you think about our business, or if you think about the Finnish economy, a global economy in the sense. So I very much urge everybody always to think about not just in risk in terms of negative sides, but also the opportunities what certain situation creates. Even if we tend to lose something in value for a moment, but maybe that could be a new start for something much better. Another thing is that when we talk about the risk, we also think about the reward. And usually, in financial markets terms, we tend to think about the risk-free financial matters like risk-free interest rate, which we have used to think about government bonds. So that if we invest in government bonds, that is risk-free, and that sets like a floor to the interest rates or other financial aspects. But as we have learned now during this financial crisis, Greek crisis, Euro crisis, there is no certainty in the government bond returns, so that we could think regard them as a risk-free thing. But anyway, that is like a floor. What we think about what is a risk-free interest rate, the floor is a government bond risk, and then coming to the entrepreneurship of companies, we tend to think that because investors, they take certain risk putting money in the company or investing in some financial assets, so they have to be compensated to get the reward out of the risk taking, because there is always possibility of losing, and because of the uncertainty of the future developments. So risk taking includes also the part that we have to have higher return to compensate. The larger the risk, the higher the return. But also then there is a more uncertainty usually. The higher the risk, the more uncertainty of the outcome. And therefore we should have much better yield or return to our investment, or what company does or invests. Nowadays, just during the past few years, I've been very happy to see this new startup company culture which has flourished in Finland, Slush and Startup Sauna of Aalto University, all those things. And usually related to startups, we think there is a lot of risk. And because of the big risk, whether they succeed or not, so it is important to find risk investors who are ready to put their money and ready to lose a lot of money, because nobody knows which kind of startups will be successful. Other thing is that there is a lot of new technologies, and we don't know exactly how these technologies develop and which kind of technologies we should pick up. And that is always one type of bet. We bet for the future. We have some vision from the future, and we want to realize our vision, and we take the risk. And nowadays that this digitalization is very much of this and goes in the heart of this risk-taking. We talk mobile technologies, cloud computing, better devices, cheaper prices. And when we actually create something in the digital plane, we don't start to kind of learn our business models in the close circumstances in our domestic markets, but we have global markets immediately. And then, of course, the success can also be, if we are successful, we can have huge potential and huge reward after taking some risk, and quite soon, because we have access to global markets. And that depends how successful we are in the end, imagination, our vision, how we can build completely new type of products and services, how we can really imagine what the customers or markets would like to have, what they don't have exactly now. And the other side is that startups usually, we think, and that is right, that they create completely new things, and they are successful, and they can, like if you think about our game industry. So those companies have started from a very, very small thing, and they have rapidly grown within a couple of years for more than billion euro companies. So that is a possibility. But the other side is that, and now I come to this definition, that risk can be also be caused by inaction. We have a lot of established big companies which are not so successful today, because maybe they have not taken enough risk. Maybe they haven't not invested enough to R&D development. Maybe they have not tracked the trends or what the customers needs and what is the customer behavior today, and understanding this huge technological change. The most cited example of this inaction, in a sense, has been Nokia, but equally well, like if you think about the digital media and printed media. So many of the established companies, not just in Finland, but globally, they have moved very, very slowly to the new technologies and understanding that there will be huge change because of the customer behavior. Most of us read newspapers or news from the internet and digital, and not have printed papers. And if the companies don't do anything, they run into big risk, and they really need a huge transformation. And that is very painful, because if the transformation is started too late, so there is actually usually not much money anymore left. And then you should invest a lot in the new things, but being inactive before, when you are really still a profitable company, so it makes everything much harder. So it is also big risks come from inaction or taking wrong views of strategic views about markets and developments and actually customers. And in that sense, social media is something that is very important here, driving the development. Then we can also think about what type of people or companies we are as risk takers. And in economics, we have usually these three categories, like risk averse, risk neutral, and risk lovers. And then we look at, if we take more risk and get probably higher return, how much utility we get out of that. And risk averse people, the utility taking more and more risk and actually expecting better returns, that reduces all the time the higher the stakes. And risk lovers, they really love to put a lot of risk, and they count on the utility, what they get if they succeed. And here, Finnish companies and Finnish society is usually thought to be like a very much risk-averse type of society compared, for example, Americans. When I was in charge of doing the globalization strategy for Finland, first strategy that was 10 years ago, and then we went to United States and looked how they did and what kind of companies they had, what type of risks they took. Everybody said that we love risk. And failure is not a bad thing, because everybody is learning out of failure. But we tend to think about it as a humiliation or shame or complete failure, not as a lessons learned or valuable experience. Here, of course, now I see that the culture also in Finland is changing. But still, we have to think about our risk appetite, how much we are willing to take it, how much we are willing to bet about the future. Do we put all the eggs in the same basket, or do we diversify? These are all the things which companies every day do, but of course as individuals we tend to do that too in our individual decisions. Then turning more to corporate risk mapping, that is something that is done in every corporate, so that thinking about the uncertainties the corporate is facing, usually and traditionally, these business execution risks have been the most part in focus. But then also like industry and economic risks, and then legal and regulatory risks. But today, the risks have been widened, and what companies need to think it's much more like technological risks, political risks, risk retained to reputation, and also like business ethics and corporate responsibility. And that comes because people have much better access to information, and if corporates behave badly or don't follow the rules or code of conduct or regulation, or have bad products or treat their personnel in the wrong way or don't have good working conditions or use child labor, that information is available everywhere immediately. And of course the customers and investors and all the stakeholders get the access to that. But that comes then because the world is much more global. We have these technologies, and also Finnish companies have been investing in what we perceive as high-risk countries, which are politically and culturally different, like China, Asia, Latin America, even Russia. And we have to learn these new cultures, new political systems, and to take higher risks and also to manage the risks. But if I compare to the past, so this social responsibility and corporate responsibility, sustainability aspects, environmental risks, they are much more in focus in the companies. They are really discussed and they are really analyzed properly. And reputation is something that if you lose the reputation, you also may lose your potential for investments or your customers or your investors, and they can have huge financial impact. Even though if you calculate different types of risks in the companies, it is very hard to put any figure if you lose a reputation, how much that costs. But still it can be a devastating situation. So good reputation is the same as license to operate. Another way to think about corporate risk is usually starting from strategic risks, whether you really have proper understanding about where the markets go, what the customers want, what the technologies are, which are the best markets to invest in. That is business environment, competition, products, customer needs, etc. And that is important because if you really take a wrong view about the future and put your money and investments in the wrong technologies, wrong markets, wrong products, you lose. The other part is operational risk, which companies really are good at managing, which go to operations, process management, investment management. This is how you operate, how you execute your business, IT leadership, and that sort of things. But of course, IT today, cyber attacks and all this, because everything is in the internet, everything is in, many things are in cloud, many things are mobile. So these risks are much, much higher than they used to be before. And that requires much more attention in the companies than before. And then we have financial risks like counterparty risks, price fluctuations, defaulting customers, etc. So these are mapped in every company several times a year. But it is, of course, it is nice to have this kind of exercise mapping all the risks what the company imagines they would have. But it is worthless if at the same time there is a process where you try to think about actions, how you mitigate and how you try to control the risks. And that is more and more the part of the risk management and risk analysis what companies do. Not just the mapping the risks and putting like a probability of the certain risk and probable impact of the risk. But really thinking what you have to do and how you can manage the risk. And not taking any of the company risk maps or risk heat maps as an example, I like to read sometimes detective books and detective stories. And I like this Stieg Larsson's trilogy where this Lisbeth Salander is a quite peculiar character, like a private detective and solving crimes. And her approach is very, very systematic, and actually it is a kind of model how we should prepare for the risks in our personal life or also in the company life. So she always makes a very thorough situation analysis, thinking everything, all the information, what is impacting the current situation or the future situation. Then thinking the consequences of if those risks materialize. And that is actually what the companies do when they think about likelihood or likely impact of certain risks if they materialize. And then take precautions. Have systems, processes, procedures in place so that if some risk materializes, you know what to do. And not because it is too late to start to think about when the risk is there, then thinking about how we should behave and what we should do and what are the controls. And then have a skillful actions to mitigate or control the risk. Of course, there are black swans, what we have been talking about, and we never know. Those are the risks. We never know. We cannot imagine. They are out of the scope. Even if we have the world's best risk mapping or risk analysis or mitigation plans, there are always risks what you are not prepared. But if your attitude and mindset towards risks and thinking about the world is in place, so it is easier then to also control this or behave in black swans cases. This was a corporate level, but then today we need to think about much more about the global risks because they are impacting all of our lives, not just corporates, but our individual lives equally. And here I have a couple of slides about this World Economic Forum. Every year they publish global risks every year. And they have 900 their stakeholders who participate globally to thinking about the risk and what would be important for global politics or companies or welfare. And they define the global risk as an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, it can cause significant negative impact for several countries or industries within the next 10 years. And their categories of the risks, what they look today, are economic, environmental, geopolitical, social, and technological. And I would say that what types of categories of risks have increased during the past 10 years? Of course, environmental, geopolitical, if you think about today's situation like what is in Ukraine or Syria or many parts of the world. So there are a lot of geopolitical risks, which there were so much if you think about 10 years ago. And then all these risks are interrelated, which makes the risks field very, very complex. And what WEF says is that the world is not really sufficiently prepared to control or mitigate the risks or understanding the risks. And this is not very clear looking picture, but what these 900 stakeholders find out as the most important global risks in this year they identified 28 global risks. And as I said, they are very much interconnected, and all these lines try to kind of characterize the connections. But what if I just read the most important ones is failure of climate change adaptation. And that has, of course, implications to water crisis, food crisis, extreme weather conditions, very many other things. And then equally big is profound social instability, which comes from this weak economic development, unemployment, underemployment, deflation, fiscal crisis, asset bubbles, failure of financial mechanism or institutions. And we have seen all these type of things happening all the time, like climate-related risks. They have been partly materialized. If you think about these economic type of risks, we have been living through them during the past few years. And then failure of national governance. So I think there are really dangerous situations in the globe in this geopolitical and political arena. So what is happening? And that has implications for interstate conflicts like war, state collapse or crisis, like if we think about Russia and the economic situation in Russia. So it is not very easy, and not very easy to think about what the future path would be. And then coming to technologies, there is cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, many other things. Other part is the risk trends, what the World Economic Forum has detected, and these are like big trends what they think that might change the interrelationship of the risks, what they have now identified for this year, or maybe even changing and worsening global situation of risks. And most important ones are climate change, environmental degradation, weakening of international governance, profound social instability, interstate conflict, and those issues what we talk about and hear every evening from the news. Aging populations, increasing polarization of societies. And what is the point of identifying this type of global risk and their interrelationships or likely trends? Is of course the same as for the companies or all of us. Try to have actions how we could reduce or mitigate those risks happening or realizing. So in that sense, it is very important work. But still, if you think about global-wise, like climate negotiations, how difficult it has been to achieve a global agreement how to reduce CO2 emissions. And if we think about these political conflicts and that sort of things, so it is really hard, but still we must try to work so that we can reduce those risks. And from the same report, they look at what are the global risks of highest concern. From geopolitical risks, they think that interstate conflict, maybe even war. And there are civil wars happening in Arabic countries. State collapse or crisis. Then if we come to the societal risks, water crisis is very much a societal risk, not just the environmental, but if there is no water, so people start to migrate. And then you see from how they assess these risks within 18 months and how they would develop in 10 years, there is a clear direction that some risks are seen to diminish over time, but some risks are seen as growing in the time. And economic side, the unemployment or underemployment, fiscal crisis, asset bubbles are seen as very big today, but diminishing in the future. So I don't go them through, but if any of you are interested, this is a really good report to read about and have a good view about the risks. And of course, that is for global companies important to think about when they invest and where they operate and which markets they go, taking all these type of risks into account. And this is another slide mapping how risks are perceived in advanced economies and equally in emerging markets. And if you look at the order of magnitude, how big risks they see, or think about what is the most important risks, there is not much difference in the order of risk what is put in or thought in advanced economies or emerging economies. But the graveness or size of the risk is considered somewhat different in these very different areas of the countries. But there is actually not very much variability in that sense. And then in the end, for companies at least, it is very important to think about these country-specific or political, regulatory risk, corruption, many of these type of things, what is happening in the various parts of the world. So this blue one tries to figure out in these blue countries fiscal crises in key economies. There are in Africa profound political and social instability, large-scale terrorist attacks, and oil price shocks to the global economy. And then if you look at in the Latin America examples like prolonged neglect of critical infrastructure, that is also in India, if you think about, very much like India's future and growth and improvement of welfare is very much tied to the infrastructure problems, not so much of other things. And then there are higher escalation, major escalation in organized crime and conflict in trade. These all kinds of things are affecting very much when we think about the future and where we put our investments, how we perceive the world. And that was actually, I thought, to talk about like how to see risks in general, not just a negative thing, but also like a positive thing, that we all have risks, individual, corporate, nations, even global risks, and how we should approach to the risk management. And I would then end my presentation to this last slide. Sometimes film stars, they have also quite a nice way to put things, and I really believe in this sentence: if you risk nothing, then you risk everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you, Anne, very much.
Thank you.
I hope you took notes.
This was very, very great start for our day. Now we have a short break, and at 11 o'clock there will be the risk panel starting in this room with a lot of professionals talking about how they perceive risk and what does risk actually mean for them. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you back here at 11 o'clock.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.